أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah for the barakat of this day of Friday, a day of Eid for the mu'mineen, a day of continuing our education and spending our time with the Quran. Alhamdulillah, we have completed the discussion around the 71st chapter of the Holy Quran, Surah An-Nuh. And today we are beginning our discussion around the 72nd chapter of the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Jinn. Surah Al-Jinn is a Makki surah that was revealed with 28 verses. And its main discussion within it that encompasses about approximately 19 verses of this surah is a discussion around the creation or the beings that are the jinn and their relationship to Islam, and explanations about their attributes and their interaction with Islam and the Holy Prophet and understanding of this religion. There are some important benefits that are included for reciting the surah, the first of which we mentioned from our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. من قرأ هذه السورة كان له الأجر بعدد كل جن والشيطان صدق بمحمد صلى الله عليه وآله وكذب به إتق رقبة. That first and foremost, when it comes to the recitation of Surah Jinn, we have the narration of our Holy Prophet where he says, "He who recites Surah Al-Jinn will be given the reward of freeing from slavery as many jinn and shaitan that both believed and belied the Prophet Muhammad and his message that was given to him." The second narration that talks about this surah and its benefit comes from our sixth Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam. قال من أكثر قراءة قل أوحي إلي, which is Surah Al-Jinn, لم يسبه في الحياة الدنيا شيء من أعين الجن ولا نفثهم ولا سحرهم ولا من كيدهم وكان مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فيقول يا ربي لا أريد بدلا ولا أريد أن أبغي عنه حولا. This hadith of Imam Sadiq talks about the practical benefits of this surah and explains and says that Imam Sadiq has said one who frequently recites this surah will be a person who will never be affected by the evil eye, magic or witchcraft or evil plots of the jinn while living in this world. And that person will be in the company of our Holy Prophet in the hereafter and will beseech Allah by saying, "Oh Allah, I do not want anyone except Rasulullah." And this person will never be pleased in the company of any other person than the company of the Holy Prophet. When we see a hadith like this, there's a few finer points to this. One that explains and says that there are many superstitions about Surah Al-Jinn, none of which I have been able to confirm except for the fact simply that one who recites Surah Jinn is protected from the evil of the jinnat. Two, the idea of saying that one who frequently recites this surah experiences these benefits. When we talk about the recitation of the Quran, we have mentioned before and we repeat again for the sake of posterity and for the sake of reminding that reciting the surah is not simply reading the Arabic. That's step one of it. Reading the Arabic, understanding its meaning and applying its principles are the entirety of a message that when this is accomplished, that we do all three of these phases, recite it in Arabic, understand what it means, apply its teachings in our lives, then we see these benefits that there is no harm that can come to us from an outside source and that we are the companions of our Holy Prophet such that Allah does not ever separate us from them. So all of these points, when they come into context, we receive the greatest of benefit of any of the surahs that we discuss. Our point in discussing these surahs is again to the interest of saying that as we recite them in Arabic, the more we understand about them, the more we can apply them in our lives and receive its complete benefit. When it comes to the revelation of this surah, there are a number of actually incidences that are tied to its revelation and different discussions amongst the Mufassirin who point out different points and inflection points in time where this surah could have been revealed. One point to note is that the conversation that takes place in Surah Jinn about the interaction of the jinn with the religion of Islam doesn't only happen in Surah Al-Jinn, also in Surah Al-Ahqaf, the 46th surah of the Holy Quran, in verses 29, 30, 31 and 32. A similar narration of the events that take place in Surah Jinn is provided as well, that the jinn came and they listened and were influenced by the Holy Quran. So therefore we have two locations in the Quran that this interaction of Islam and the jinn takes place. This particular surah, there is one narration that the Mufassirin explained from Ibn Abbas that explains, and he says that when our Prophet was busy reciting Salat al-Fajr and he was reading the Holy Quran in this prayer of his, a group of jinn who were investigating their affairs. This investigating their affairs says that the group of jinn amongst them, the ones, used to be able to traverse through the heavens and to take news of future events and to come back and assist the soothsayers and know the future events of the earth. Upon the advent of Nabi Isa, they were restricted to not proceeding further than the fourth of the heavens that exist. And upon the arrival of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were restricted to this final heaven, or the lowest of the heavens, and the other six were forbidden from them. When they found their condition that they could not traverse through the heavens and to be able to derive information of future events. Now this deriving of future events, there's a few different explanations that explain where this comes from. One explains and says that in the seventh heaven and the higher heavens, where the malaika would receive their responsibilities from Allah that had to be executed, the jinn would secretly listen to those responsibilities and return to the earth and inform about it, and thus they knew of future events, because as the malaika were receiving their responsibility amongst themselves, the jinn would listen and report. There's another explanation that looks at the possibility of how time and space are relative entities, and that there is more that can be understood when looking at the earth from a far distant space, or that the time in that space moves differently than it does in this world, and as a consequence their ability to know events that will be tied to the future in this timeline versus the timeline that they were in, and their ability to move between these places allowed them to know the future. Essentially, the soothsayers who used to have an ability to narrate events in the future by the assistance of the jinn lost that ability at the arrival of the Holy Prophet. The jinn continued this process of trying to go and to search for that knowledge, but suddenly they found themselves restricted. And at that point in time, when they found themselves restricted, they sent out sentries from amongst themselves and said, if our ability has been restricted, something on this earth has changed. And when they sent their sentries out into this earth, one came upon our Prophet who was busy in the recitation of Salat al-Fajr. And he heard the recitation of the Quran from our Prophet, and therefore he understood and knew that this Quran was the reason why the restriction had been placed upon the jinn, and they would no longer be able to traverse the heavens, and they discovered the truth of the message of Islam. Hence, one of the discussions of where Surah Al-Jinn was presented to the people. Another narration talks about how our Holy Prophet went to the city of Ta'if after the shahadat of Abu Talib. When Abu Talib dies, our Prophet is left alone in the city of Mecca, and he realizes the insecurity that he has in the city of Mecca, so he looks for other allies and places where he can proceed to preach to the people and educate them. And famously, our Prophet goes to the city of Ta'if, which is a nearby neighboring city to the city of Mecca, and it was well known to be one of the polytheistic cities until the very end, where it was one of the last places to fall to the control of the Muslimin. But when our Prophet leaves Mecca and he goes to Ta'if, there's a marketplace in Ta'if which was very famous, Iqd, by the name of Iqd, where many of the Arabs would gather. And our Prophet intended to leave the city of Mecca, go to Ta'if and to preach in this place. The trip of our Prophet to the city of Ta'if is very famous, that not only did our Prophet not receive any support, but they abused and attacked our Prophet so much that he left the city of Ta'if bloody. It's narrated that our Prophet accomplished nothing in the city of Ta'if. No one would listen to his message. But as he returned from there, he stopped in a garden or in a field where he took a place of rest because of his injuries, and he stopped to pray. That the slave that was serving in that area was the one who came to listen to our Prophet, and he was the only one who converted in that trip. And it said that after this the Prophet returned. When he was returning, he passed by a place called the Valley of Jinn. And in the Valley of Jinn, our Prophet again stopped for ibadat, and when he stopped for ibadat, a number of the jinnat listened to the kalam and the speech and the recitation of the Quran of our Holy Prophet, and they then accepted the religion of Islam. And then after their acceptance of the religion of Islam, they went and they taught the rest of the jinnat about the Quran and the religion of Rasulullah and the differences that had been created in the religions of the Jews and the Christians, and that why they were wrong and why this was the correct religion. This narration is given by a number of different people that explain and tell us that this is how the events took place, that while our Prophet intended to convert the humans of Ta'if, instead it was the jinnat who accepted his message of Islam. These discussions, and this narration is from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who then goes and he gives this narration. It's well known amongst both the Sunni and Shia Mufassirin to discuss this event. Understanding this background, when we look at Surah Al-Jinn and we start discussing Surah Al-Jinn, we're going to see a number of discussions about the attributes of the jinn that are mentioned within the Quran, and as well as the fact of their submission to the religion of Islam. Looking at the first two verses specifically, when we look at, for example, the first verse, we see Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قُلْ أُوهِيَ عِلَيَّ أَنَّهُ أَسْمَعَ نَفَرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ فَقَالُوا إِنَّا سَمِعْنَا قُرْآنًا عَجَبًا. The first verse of this surah talks about the interaction where Allah is giving the instruction, Ya Rasulullah, say to the people, it has been revealed unto me that a group of jinn listened, a group of jinn or a jinn listened to me. Then they said, we have heard a wondrous Qur'an. In this verse, we begin to understand some of the attributes of the jinnat that are mentioned here. First and foremost, Allah, when He makes a statement, قُلْ أُوهِيَ إِلَيَّ, that it has been revealed to me, explains and tells us first and foremost that the human being does not have the ability to see jinnat openly when they want to. That even the Prophet himself is announcing, and Allah is instructing the Prophet himself to announce that Allah is the one who is revealing to him that the jinn listened to the kalam, not that the jinn were present and the Prophet knew of it, and that he was openly interacting with them. The expectation is such that we wouldn't know of open interaction unless if Allah permits it. This explains one of the fundamental attributes of a jinn, that of the creation of the jinn is not like the creation of man. When we look at mankind, we see mankind possessing physical attributes that are measurable by the elements and understanding that we have and are in a spectrum that our eyes have the ability to see, and therefore we can see human beings. However, two other creations that Allah mentions, the jinn and the malaika, exist on a different spectrum altogether, and the malaika being created of nur and light, and the jinn being created of fire, are things that are not naturally seen by human beings, less that either one, the human being has a spectrum or has an ability that allows him to see creation other than human beings. And this can have three different levels. One is the angels, which we know that only the Anbiya were given permission to be able to see the angels, no one other than the Anbiya. Even the A'immah alayhimus salam could listen to the angels, but not see the angels, as per many riwayat as they explain. The second is the realm of spirits and souls, that some people, their spectrum of their eyes allows them to see this, but it is a very rare and unusual event. And third is the spectrum of the jinn, and again, some people may have that ability in that spectrum to see the jinn, but it is an unusual and rare event, to the extent where it was uncommon, to the point where even our Prophet is told that a jinn in its natural form is not something the Prophet sees, that rather, uhiya ilayya, that Allah is revealing to the Prophet that the jinn were listening to the message of the Holy Qur'an. So, Allah explains and He says that it has been revealed unto me. Say, Ya Rasulullah, it has been revealed unto you that a group of jinn listened to this Qur'an, and they said, we have heard a wondrous Qur'an. Qur'anan ajaba. This point indicates the aspect of the intellect of jinn as well too, that their intellect is not that of an animal. Why? Because they are able to recognize the difference, and that the Qur'an itself is wondrous, points to the fact that a jinn possesses intellect, possesses reason, possesses the ability to infer and understand and differentiate between levels of speech and communication, and recognize when something is above the par of standard communication and speech that will be normal amongst people. When we look at both of these stories of revelation that were explained, that whether it was that the Prophet was reciting Salat al-Fajr and the jinn passing through the lands heard this Qur'an, they recognized that the Qur'an was not like anything else, is an explanation that they possess intellect above that of the haywanat, and that they are not categorized with animals, but rather they are intellectual beings. Another proof of their intellectuality is the aspect that Allah talks about, that on the Day of Judgment, mankind and jinn will both be held accountable for their actions, meaning they are subject to the same test that we are. When there's a discussion that points to this, that the jinn are subject to the same test as we are, and they have an aspect of intellect similar to us, we still say that humanity is superior. Insan is superior to jinn, simply because the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam amongst mankind raises the status of mankind above all other creation. It can also be explained and say that why was our Prophet an insan and not a jinn, on the fundamental that insan is that basic principle and that basic stepping stone that every other being can be measured against. Had it been that, for example, that the Anbiya were sent to the jinn as opposed to the human beings, our explanation would be, these are higher levels of being that are not on our platform, how can we understand them? Therefore, Allah placing the Anbiya and guidance in insan, allowed for these other creations that though they may consider themselves better, as Shaitan did, Ana khayram minhu, Shaitan said himself. But Allah subjugated their authority to humanity and to our Prophet and to the Ahlul Bayt to show that this is the best of creation and it is more complete in intellect than anything else. In this aspect, we see that we understand that the jinn have an intellect, they have character, they have the ability to differentiate between knowledge and information, and that they can come to the conclusion that inna hadha al-Qur'an, inna sami'na Qur'ana ajaba, that we heard a wondrous Qur'an, that Qur'an is unlike anything else. This statement is compounded in the second verse to show the complexity of the intellect of the jinn because of how they describe what they heard from the Qur'an. يَهْدِي إِلَى الرُّشْدِ فَآمَنَّا بِهِ وَلَن نُشْرِكَ بِرَبِّنَا أَحَدًا. This second verse of Surah Al-Jinn points to a very important principle that should not be ignored and not be taken lightly. Yahdi ila rush. This is the Qur'an that which we heard that they are mentioning in the first verse as ajaba. They elaborate what was so wondrous about this Qur'an, what was so amazing about this Qur'an. And they explain and say it was wondrous because Yahdi ila rushd, that it guides the people to the right path. The term rushd is a very broad term that can include many different aspects of understanding what is right and what is a good path to take. But one of the important things about this kalimat al-rushd, and that Allah uses this in association with the Qur'an and describes that they were able to determine this, is to say that one who interacts with the Qur'an has only one aspect that they gain from it, and that is rushd and benefit and guidance. The Qur'an is not something that brings to misguidance. The Qur'an is not something that leads to a person going away from the right path. But rather, however we interact with it, it will always bring us in the direction of goodness and guidance. Hence, even the jinn mention and say, Yahdi ila rushd, that this Qur'an will always bring us to something that is better than ourselves. And then it elaborates further that what is the best rushd, what is the best right path that this Qur'an guides to, is where they explain and they say, فَآمَنَّا بِهِ, and we keep faith in it, وَلَن نُشْرِكَ بِرَبِّنَا أَحَدًا, that the best of the guidance in this Qur'an that they can attain and that they achieve to, is that we will never join in worship anyone or anything with our Lord Allah. Hence this elaboration shows us the depth of their intellect, that immediately upon interacting with the Qur'an, they can come to the determination that this Qur'an is something amazing, special and unique, and two, that whatever we interact with this Qur'an will give us rushd, will give us guidance, will bring us to the right path. Which is a lesson for us, that today, do we take the time with the Qur'an? Do we acknowledge that if this Qur'an will always bring us to rushd, do we spend time with it on a daily, weekly, continuous basis? Can we appreciate the depth of its intelligence, or is our intelligence naqis, limited? That we read the Qur'an but we are no different or benefited for it. Allah giving us a lesson by showing us the immediate impact within the jinn of experiencing the Qur'an once and the extent of their knowledge and information. And then at the same breath, we know that we are ashraf al-makhluqat, means that our ability to derive from, to be impacted by, to be guided by, to be supported by, to lean on for development of the Qur'an is better than anyone else. So then why should us, O mankind, not be better than these jinn in being close to the Qur'an and receiving benefit from it? Inshallah, we'll continue our discussion next week on elaborating from this surah about the teachings of the Qur'an. We ask Allah again, by the right of this day, by the right of the Hadirin Ghaibin, that Allah keep us connected to the Qur'an. Ya Allah, keep us in the hidayat of the Holy Qur'an. Ya Allah, make sure that our families and our children stay attached to the religion of Islam and to the Holy Qur'an. Oh Allah, keep us attached to the example of the Holy Prophet and his progeny. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families and our children from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل وسلم على أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين والحسن والحسين سيد شباب أهل الجنة وعلي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي باقر علم النبيين وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد الهادي والحسن بن علي الأسكري وحجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان اللهم صل على محمد. عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره وجعلنا من أعوانه والأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. I enjoin upon you and myself to have fear and piety of Allah. Briefly in our discussion, there's a lot going on in our country right now where the news is releasing the figure to say that over 2,200 arrests have been made since April 18th associated with college campus protests relating to the crisis that's going on in Palestine, which is a lot for protests. The Associated Press records that at least 56 incidents in 43 different U.S. colleges have taken place since April 18th. So at least 43 different campuses and 56 events have happened where police intervention has been needed and that these items have been recorded. The extremity of these events is such that, for example, from California, the news was said that we need to hire security for the protesters. Conversation happened, why would you need security for protesters? And they explained and they said that recently when there were pro-Palestinian protesters on UCLA's campus, counter-protesters came and physically assaulted these protesters, and the police and the administration refused to intervene for a number of hours and let the fights go on for a number of hours to let them solve this amongst themselves. So the consequence was that now people were paying for security to protect these protesters. It's fair that when we look at someone who's willing to stand up for justice, that we support them. Right? In the Quran, in a number of places, Allah reminds us, stand up for justice. Where, for example, in Surah An-Nisa, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ. All those of you who believe, be maintainers of justice. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ لِلَّهِ الشُّهَدَاءَ بِالْقِسْطِ. O you who believe, be upright for Allah and be bearers of witness with justice. In other places in the Quran, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَعْظِمُكُمْ بِوَاحِدَةٍ أَنَّ تَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ مَثْنَى وَفُرَادَى ثُمَّ تَتَفَكَّرُوا. Say, Allah explains and He says, I exhort only one thing, that you rise up for Allah's sake in twos and singly, and then ponder over the message of Allah as well. This promotion of justice is fantastic. It's something we should be promoting, that if anyone wants to raise the voice of justice, that we also back that concept of justice. This isn't a new discussion that we've had. As a matter of fact, even when we had the shootings that took place in Florida, we explained and we said that Muslims don't agree with the abuse of any human being, even if they are sinful. We don't agree that they should be attacked and abused, and that it's injustice that any person be killed or abused for the aspect of their faith and their belief. We should stand up for these things. We should educate people about what the true teachings of Islam are and the aspects of justice and promoting kindness for all people who may be abused. We had these conversations when there was ethnic cleansing happening in Burma, and we discussed and pointed out the reality of the message of Islam and equity and fair treatment of all people, that this isn't something that we accept. Anytime there's an abuse of individuals, innocent people, anytime there is oppression, Islam has instructed us to rise up. And we should. And we should be seen as Muslimin collectively who rise up and stand up and support this concept of justice. But pay attention that as much as we're being told about what to discuss, and we are reactive to what the news teaches us. As having run a non-profit organization that offers humanitarian aid, those causes that actually receive the most support are the ones that are discussed in the news. And the ones that aren't discussed in the news, even if you tell people that someone is in need of assistance, they say, yeah, but I want to help that guy that the news is telling me about. It's okay. But there are things that are important to us that we have to pay attention to. That while we're standing in solidarity with the Muslimin to defend the right of these people and to defend the right of those who are oppressed, the Muslimin are the ones who are killing us. Many of you may not realize, but this week in Herat, Afghanistan, there was an attack against the Shias. And it was a horrendous attack. They walked into a masjid and they killed 7 people, including the imam of the masjid and a 3-year-old infant who was killed, or a 3-year-old toddler who was killed in that masjid as well too. And the explanation given in Afghanistan and around the world is that these were Shias, and shoulders were shrugged and nobody really cared. So what's happening? Here, in this place, we're standing shoulder to shoulder, defending the rights of Muslimin, and behind us, the Muslimin are killing us. I'm not telling you don't stand up for the right, but when you stand up for the right of these Muslimin, explain and stand openly and show and say that I'm a Shia, and I believe that this is wrong. My Imam is the one who taught me to stand up against injustice and oppression. We are the first ones to come onto the front line when anyone is oppressed, because we have the example of Imam Hussein that we remember every year. And he was the one who stood up against oppression and injustice. We won't stop that. But we have to educate our communities, the Muslimin, and take these opportunities to educate them and show them that we're not your enemy. We're Muslimin just like you are. Our Islam is the same, our Prophet is the same, our Allah is the same. As a community, as a collective, we haven't done anything to fix this problem. Till today. Someone comes to our masjid today to join us for Jummah, who doesn't recognize the difference in some of the sunnat, some of the mustahabbat of salat that we perform. We don't have any infrastructure to educate them. We don't have anyone who's well versed in the process of saying, hey, listen, here's some information. Learn that we're not your enemies, we're not different, we're not outside of the bounds of Islam. There's nothing that we do that is forbidden in this religion. But rather our example follows the sunnah of the Prophet, even if that sunnah differs from you. Here's proof from your own books that shows this. We didn't do this work. We don't have this conversation. We don't have resources. So it's true, we have to complete this responsibility that's on us to stand up for Islam and Muslimin. Don't walk away from that. I'm not using the attacks against Shias to justify that, oh, we don't help and we don't support Islam. That's not what our Prophet taught us. That's not what Imam Hussein taught us. It's not what any of the Ahlul Bayt taught us. The Ahlul Bayt taught us that stand up against injustice anywhere, in anyone. When we look at the life of our 4th Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, there were those who were his outright enemies, who had been open to the attacks and the killing of his family and the expulsion of his family from the city of Medina. Yet our Imam did not abuse them, and our Imam did not step away from the responsibilities of justice. When we look at the personality of Marwan ibn Hakam, Mal'un, who was responsible for Imam Hussein leaving the city of Medina in fear for his life. When Marwan is cast out by the politicians of the time, and the people of Medina want to have a plot to kill this man, and they say that before we attack Marwan, we will give Imam Zain al-Abidin, who has the most right, to attack him first. And they wait. They corner him into a place and they wait for Imam Zain al-Abidin to come to cast the first stone. And they say Imam Zain al-Abidin has more right than anyone else. When the Imam comes and he sees this crowd waiting, this mob waiting, the Imam turns to Marwan and he says, should you need any help, we will offer you assistance. And he leaves. The Imam is teaching, even this one who oppressed my family, I will not allow oppression in this existence to happen. If it is subject to justice, then we will support it. But if you want to oppress him and have mob mentality, then the Imam is teaching that that's not something we'll do. So we're not going to stand and say that, oh, if one of our people is oppressed, we won't help the Muslimin or we won't do the right thing. No. But let's take it as an opportunity to educate, to teach. Show what is our message. Show who we are as a people. Learn the proper language. Create the infrastructure that we need to unify and create identity outside of extreme crisis, that us as Muslimin stand together. In extreme crisis, yeah, we're standing together. This is extreme crisis. But everything outside of that is our job to create. We have to do the work. We have to invite and show that this Islam that we live is the Islam of the Ahlul Bayt, is Islam of the Prophet's family, is Islam of the Prophet. Nothing different than that. Nothing different than that. And this is our time to do it. And the consequence is, if we do it here, and we begin it here, and we begin the process of unity here, it can spread. But if we're silent, if we don't create that infrastructure, then who else is there left to be? We have the most security and peace. We're not at fear of sectarian violence. We're not at fear of issues amongst ourselves, because this is a land of free speech and free religion. Then we have to use it. We have to lay the foundations. We have the greatest responsibility to protect and to serve the right of those who are in need, and to support those people that are suffering because of their faith. We ask Allah again, by the right of this day, by the right of the Hadireen Ghaibin, that, oh Allah, first and foremost, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Oh Allah, give us the tawfiq to follow the upright religion of Islam. Ya Allah, by the right of this day, by the right of the Quran, Ahlul Bayt, we have gathered here with hajat. Fulfill the hajat of all those who are present. Ya Allah, there are those amongst our families, the mu'mineen, the community, who are suffering through sickness and disease. Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, there are those who are suffering through insecurity and strife. Give aman to the mu'mineen, Muslimin, wherever they happen to be. Oh Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Entitle us to the ziyarat of Imam Hussein in this world and the shafa'ah of Abu Abdullah in the hereafter. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allah ya'muru bil-adli wal-ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal-munkar wal-baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Sadaqallahu al-'aliyyul 'azim.
Mu'mineen, one request, please check your cell phone, make sure it's on silent.